Molo Sanbonani, hello, how's it? Good evening, Goeienaand, and shalom. Welcome. You're watching the Big Daddy Liberty Show. Apologies for being a couple of minutes late. I am in a different location, and it's enough to say that that I had a rather eventful evening, being stuck behind the protesters. For this, I don't know, I suppose I can't call them KZN shutdown because I'm here in Gauteng, in Johannesburg, but fires across the road, big stones being hurled at vehicles, rocks being placed on the main road, the arterial road that enters El Dorado Park. And I'm assuming there are other parts of Johannesburg too, which are perhaps on fire. But we'll discuss that here tonight because it has been the very issue that has made the news. So bear with me, people. I just need to quickly sort out what is usually done before the show. But as I said, I did not get the opportunity to do that. In fact, whilst I'm doing that, let's get those likes up, people. Let's make sure that engagement is over 50%. As the numbers trickle in. And do me a solid, please. As you get that like up, please share the link. Tell your friends that Liberty and Friends is on. I didn't get a chance to do any of that either. So before I get to my guests, and do I not have a interesting and rather veritable mix of guests tonight, including a new face, which I always look forward to. Before I get to that, a reminder, please, that in the upcoming week, we're going to be shooting. I'm doing quite a bit of traveling as we are recording and putting together a special feature on how this lockdown has impacted ordinary South Africans, specifically those who are in the sort of hospitality and tourism sector, who are hardest hit by this level 4 lockdown. We'll tell their stories, the very stories that the likes of Cyril Ramaphosa and his asinine family meeting does not tell. So look forward to that. That should be on the BDL show, not this week, but the following week, Wednesday. So that's on this week. Please, as I said, hit that like button and share that stream. And speaking about sharing a space, let me bring on some of my guests for tonight. First up is a chap who you have seen on the show before. He is from the Daily Friend publication. Remember, the Daily Friend is your day-to-day news, analysis, and opinion website. That's www.dailyfriend.co.za. Who am I talking about? Of course, Nicholas Lorimer. Nick, good evening and welcome to Liberty and Friends.
How's it, Sindile? Good to be here.
Good to have you. Very good to have you. Another familiar face, someone who is one part of the trio out at the Manpatria podcast. A chap who has a very smooth way of getting to his point, and someone who's very popular, as all the chaps from the Manpatria show are on here. I'm talking, of course, about Koketso Sechane. Koketso, as he is on screen. Good evening. Welcome to Liberty and Friends.
Yeah, good to be here again. It's Koketso Resane, Just
my bad. What did I say?
Yeah, well, you said something else. Let's leave it at that.
Oh, yeah. I hope I didn't say. Okay. Anyway, moving on. Speaking about the Manpatria podcast, another face, indeed, the founder of that very podcast, a podcast that I encourage you to please bookmark and have it be a part of your online viewing. The host of that very podcast, the man himself, Dumo Denga. There he is. Dumo, good evening.
Good evening, Sindile. How are you doing?
Hey, man. Thank God. I'm very, very well. And last but not least, hey, man, you guys know what it is. Whenever there's a new face, we do the new face dance. New face. I'm talking, of course, about a guy who has some of the best analysis you'll find online. I called him a political analyst in the descriptor of this video. He'll forgive me if that's not quite how he wants to be referred to. But Sindile Vabaza, there he is. Sindile, good evening.
Yes, evening. It's great to be here. Always great to talk. Always great to, Whatever works for people. Political analyst. I just am somebody with too many opinions.
There you go. That's how we like it here on Liberty and Friends. Remember, this is the show every Sunday evening at 8 p.m. that wraps up the news week that was. What are some of the things that made headlines this week that got you talking and maybe got you angry, happy, sad, something that you perhaps want to hear a bit more analysis on? So tonight's audience are fellows who are very capable to do exactly that. Guys, just give me 2 seconds here as I just go into the back room of things a little bit. But maybe as I do that, let me pop a question to you guys so I can buy myself some time here and look smooth while I do it. Dumo, I'm going to begin with you. And I'm going to begin with what is perhaps top of mind. In the intro of this show, I spoke about just exactly what happened to me just now. And it's happening to perhaps hundreds of thousands of South Africans right now who are being terrorized by what is essentially a small cabal of individuals who are looking to shill for a politician. The politician I refer to, of course, is the one Jacob Zuma, who finds himself incarcerated right now in escort and has now, whether directly or indirectly or himself or through his proxies, whipping up a frenzy of acolytes across the country. It began on social media with the incitement to violence of by certain individuals, including his daughter, and is now obviously finding expression on the streets of South Africa. Your initial thoughts as you see things begin to spread, seemingly?
It's a very sad situation because number one, we're in a lockdown, so a lot of people have lost their jobs, and a lot of people are struggling. And then, Zuma goes to jail, and then on top of that, this violence that we see now has resulted in businesses getting some being a lot being put on the back foot. So I mean, we saw in Alex today, shops were torched. Even I saw a guy whose truck was also torched as well. And I mean, this is not good. This is actually a terrible situation to be in, and all for someone who is no longer the president. And this is also another issue that I have, is that a lot of people have become obsessed with Zuma. And as a result of their obsession, they have become irrational. It's almost like a cult. And what we need to do is just be a bit more rational about the situation. Look, fine, you may like Zuma and you may not like the fact that he's in jail, but you can't just be putting everybody's life on standstill just because he's in jail. Look, it's only 15 months, and look, he probably might even serve like less than a month of it anyway, given what happened to Andile Lungisa. So, it's not really worth it in the end. And many of those businesses that were torched were black businesses anyway. So I mean, it's not worth it. So, that's my initial thoughts on it. People just need to think a bit more rational on this issue.
Absolutely. Sindile, let me come to you because you made a post on your Facebook akin to that last point that Dumo was making around the irony, the rather delicious irony of the usual crowd. The Zuma crowd are the ones who fashion themselves as being pro-black, wanting to see black entrepreneurs, black industrialists, they'll often tell us. In fact, they've self-described themselves as the RET crowd, the Radical Economic Transformation crowd. But it's those same people, Sindile, who are currently torching trucks that belong to black entrepreneurs, torching businesses, as Dumo said, in Alexandra, etc., that belong to black individuals. The hypocrisy of it all.
Okay. I have been thinking about this for quite a bit today. I think there's two separate kinds of people in the Zuma camp. I think there's the people like Jacob Zuma and the people who benefited from state capture, the people who are living in Houghton and all of these nice areas of Mhlanga that weren't attacked. And then I think there's kind of like the cannon fodder supporters of Jacob Zuma. And I found something very telling on an SABC interview where one of the men was talking not just about Zuma, because I think Zuma is a proxy for a lot of things. They were talking about the 350 Rand. They were talking about them being hungry. They were talking about shop owners, foreign shop owners being ahead of them. And they were talking about how Ramaphosa represents something else that they don't want. And Zuma, for whatever memory, whatever reason they think of Zuma, Zuma represents something positive for them. So I think for people who are the fodder, it's a mixture of I'd honestly say xenophobia. It's a mixture of people being hungry, because one of the things that's not talked about in this lockdown is how much food insecurity has increased in this country. And I think part of it is the fact that people are tired of not having jobs and mobility and seeing their children move forward in life. So I think the first group of people, the Zuma and the people that benefit, use the second group of people. But in analysis, we often smash them together as if they're one group, because I think that's the issue fundamentally with this identity politic that relies on race, is that it kind of it jumps over the fact that people have different sort of issues around their class, in terms of okay, I'm working class, I'm struggling, I live in a hostel, I don't always have food, the pay or whatever. And then there's the people who use that language to benefit, like Zuma. So I think that for me is sort of the issue. I think the people that are fodder are just really angry. They're really frustrated, because someone once told me this country is only 9 missed meals away from anarchy.
That's right.
And I think that's true, because people have been going hungry. People have been going without so much during these various lockdowns. And that's because of what government's done. And the frustration is being felt, and it's not always reported in the media. And I think Zuma was just a perfect opportunity. It's like, I think what happened in America, I don't think people would have responded, for example, with what happened with, say, George Floyd, if they hadn't been locked down so long in America. It was just the spark for them to express frustrations about a lot of other things that they felt. And so I feel this Zuma thing is that, and it's been tacked on, and they're using Zuma as a proxy for that, because they don't know how exactly to express a lot of their frustration. A lot of it is irrational, this love of Zuma, because they've painted Zuma as some kind of savior and some kind of person. And I mean, part of it also has to do with race issues, because I think they're going, wait, I don't have, but from my vantage point, it looks like white people always have. And when Zuma was president, he was always talking against them. So he's for me. So there's so much going on. And I think the first group of people are the ones I'm really angry at. It's the Zuma faction that has got an education, that have got opportunities, that are using the second group. Because I personally feel I'm far more understanding of the second group because of the frustrations and the hunger and the everything. But the first group are the ones who are really criminal and who are really cruel and who are really doing the stuff that's really just destroying us.
That's right. And I must move it on to Nicholas, and I'll come to you, Koketso, because Sindile is on the money. And I tweeted something to that very effect today or yesterday, and I said what's been disgusting to see throughout this whole thing is how it has been the political elites, the ones who actually are very closely yoked to the politicians of the day, who then dispense patronage, right? It's been those political elites who are effectively mobilizing and whipping up the legitimate anger of often isolated communities who have a particular issue of that community. They whip up that anger and then tag on, as Sindile points out, the Zuma brand to it. And you saw this almost on social media, in particular, the narratives games, the propaganda game, whether they were using old videos, for example, to argue that, look, to project that they're everywhere and they're about to shut down the country, all because of Jacob Zuma. Meanwhile, the reality, Nicholas, is that if you really want to be honest, this is actually quite a insignificant minority, significant in their violence, but insignificant in their numbers of individuals who are doing this.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I agree with the idea that there's a lot of people here who are taking on something else here. They're not out there necessarily in the streets because of Zuma. In fact, I think there's very little evidence that Zuma is particularly popular, despite how he likes to portray himself as the voice of the unemployed masses or whatever term he would use. In reality, he's not actually a very popular guy, and we've seen that from towards the end of his presidency. I mean, he came into office quite popular, but since then it's kind of all been downhill. And I wonder to some degree what the political machinations behind this are, because if the plan for him all along was, I'm going to go to jail and then get my supporters to rile up trouble so that I can get out, well, South Africa has huge numbers of social delivery, service delivery protests and riots and things all the time. This is not new. It's not bringing the country to a standstill. I mean, we've even had highways blocked before. This isn't even the first time that's happened. So that's really not a great strategy if that's his long-term plan. But yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot of opportunism here. Some people who are just kind of seeing a gap, maybe that now's an excuse to riot. Maybe now's an excuse to get rid of those foreigners we don't like. Now's an excuse to maybe get some food because we've had a really tough winter so far. And some people are just there for fun, I'm sure, because rioting is fun. But yeah, but yeah, I agree. It's Zuma's not really popular, and this won't work because the ANC has already the Cyril faction has already said that this is engineered social discontent and doesn't represent the true will of the people. Now, I don't know since when they became the arbiters of the true will of the people, but suffice to say that I don't think government's going to buckle to this.
And Koketso, I must come to you. And sorry, guys, I want to get that initial sense from everybody. Then we can actually just discuss this because, as we're speaking right now, the president himself is speaking, and we'll get to that as we somewhat try and follow what he's saying and engage here. But, Koketso, there is an element of danger, though, involved in the stoking of this kind of violence, legitimizing the sort of heinous, assault against ordinary people. It's been, because that's what makes this whole thing almost angering, if I'm to be honest. It angers me. It's that ordinary chap, the God-fearing, law-abiding, family-oriented guy, the guy who just wants to get on with things, whether they live in El Dorado Park, where I was earlier on, or in Soweto, or Mlazi, Kwamashu, Khayelitsha, wherever. That ordinary chap who has no interest in the petty politics of the day being inconvenienced and even their lives being placed in danger.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you talk to people, right, a lot of people actually become victims of this sort of violence. And I think I speak for most people when I say that, fine, the ANC is the majority party and is quite a sizable organization, but most people aren't ANC members. Most Black people aren't ANC members. Most Zulu people aren't ANC members either. So when these sort of things happen, it's actually to the detriment of people. Now, the narrative we're given is that obviously, because people revere Zuma so much, supposedly, that somehow this is all done under a good cause. And that's necessarily not the truth, because I think someone noted out earlier that if you consider that your mother, who was working at a shop, now doesn't have a shop to go to tomorrow, which is Monday, because the shop has been looted and vandalized, what does that actually say? What's the economic impact of someone's mother not being able to earn an income because of all this violent protests? Most people realize this. And this is why I believe that most people actually wouldn't sign up to join a violent protest, which then begs the question, who are the people who actually do this sort of thing? And this brings into question the whole unemployment issue. I don't believe that if someone has a job to be at, they can just decide on a Tuesday morning to go and join a strike action of some sort. The net effect of people sitting about now is that they don't have anything better to do. And now when you put in a figurehead like Zuma at the top, who they can easily identify with, because exactly like what Sindile and Nicholas just mentioned, they see him as almost a savior. These are people who literally have nothing better to do. So it's to everyone's detriment that unemployment remains unsolved. And we're actually seeing what the result is of it right now with these protests. Absolutely.
Guys, I'm going to move us on for a moment to just an associated issue. And I say it's associated because it ties in what Cyril Ramaphosa is doing right now, delivering this family meeting nonsense, and of course with Jacob Zuma himself languishing in a prison and the incitement to violence. And that is the issue of this actual lockdown. Now, those who are the real BDL fans know my position on lockdown. It's an asinine policy. It doesn't really achieve the stated outcomes, but it definitely has massive unintended and intended consequences insofar as destruction of people's livelihoods and the like. But let me not prosecute that issue for now. Let me look at let me zoom in on a particular point, and it's really this. If you're a government and you say, here's the law, here's a policy, everybody must follow it, then by goodness, everybody must follow it. But what we've seen here from the likes of Cyril Ramaphosa and particularly Ubegi, the asshat Cele, who's the Minister of Police, is a selective policing of their own rules and an allowance of the political elite for them to do as they please, whilst the ordinary Joe, the ordinary chap, there's nearly 500,000 South Africans, ordinary South Africans, who have been locked up and subject to fines, imprisonment, and even just embarrassing, sorry, I can't pronounce humiliating, there it is, situations. I mean, there's a story I shared online of a young chap, a young go-getter chap who, there was a family emergency, he had to leave under lockdown period, and he was literally arrested and is now being taken through the criminal process and will have a criminal record. And this is an up-and-coming chap, the very sort of person who ordinarily would never be in conflict with the law. So it's that person, the ordinary Joe, who's been affected by this lockdown. And I'll get to why this is a bit of a problem also. And Sindile, I'm going to come to you. Because again, just to come back to the point where I was beginning with this, the political elites run riot. They can do whatever they want. If they want to gather, which is supposedly legal under this level 4 lockdown, fudge it, they'll gather. The EFF, for example, held a massive protest at the border between South Africa and eSwatini, formerly Swaziland. Not a single police presence of any real sense there to try and break things or whatever the case may be. And of course, just outside the gates of Jacob Zuma, before he was arrested, and of course after he was arrested, huge throngs of people there to show their support for Umsholozi. That hypocrisy, Sindile, of who will be tough on the elderly, tough on surfers and Ogogo who sell Acha in Joburg, but say nothing to the EFF and the likes of Umsholozi's supporters. Sindile, just unmute yourself. Sindile, taking his. Let me. I'm gonna help you out.
Yeah, help me out. My technology is not doing well.
We can hear you now.
Okay, fantastic. I think this has been something that has been ongoing throughout this entire lockdown, and I think part of it is that I think people who are perceived to be powerless or voiceless can be easily policed by the government. So those of us who are ordinary Joes, who don't have political connections, or people who can gather up and become mobs that can become violent, the police are less likely to push them around. So the police either respect kind of political rank, or they respect people who have a propensity to violence. So if I'm just an ordinary person and I just sort of break rules, they're just going to roughhouse me and then chuck me in the back of a police van. I mean, at the beginning of the lockdown, there was a lot of people who are going hungry, who are poor people, who pick up trash or pick up recycling things, and they were just thrown in jail without trial for months on end. And that's because they can't resist. They've got nothing to sort of appeal to, no authority. And so that's what happens. That's pretty much a nutshell of what happens in this country. I think this lockdown has just kind of accentuated what already happens in this country, is that you will probably get away with stuff more if you have a propensity to violence or if you're politically connected. It's just, for me, I think that's where it is. I think that's where the hypocrisy lies. Because somebody said to me as a joke that, because in Alex, what happened was they burnt down the biggest supermarket and 150 people are employed there, which, judging by the labor market in South Africa, that's basically 150 families without food. And somebody asked, where are the police? and somebody made a joke about, no, they're chattering their teeth at Alex police station because they don't want to mess with the crowd. And I think that's true. That's simply the case. They don't want to mess with a crowd that's violent and fights back usually. And that's how it goes. And the political elite, they've got connections, so they won't mess with them either. It's as easy and as simple as that.
Well, here's what makes it even more disgusting. Nicholas, I'm going to come to you then, Dumo. Here's what makes it even more disgusting. A good mate of mine, Gideon Hubert, shout out to Gideon, who's, of course, the founder of Paratus.info, shared a post of a screenshot of a WhatsApp conversation between him and a friend somewhere in KZN, Durban, if I'm not mistaken, where at the time, rioters were looting a Tops, I think, one of the sort of booze shops. And the exchange was between a particular individual who was watching this and I think the local police station commander or something along those lines. Don't quote me as to who was who, but it was definitely the police and some community member. And the police officer said, look, we just don't have the manpower. We're not going to be able to come there to enforce the law. We'll come and watch. We'll come and watch, she said. We'll keep an eye on things. It's like one Johnny Walker, two Johnny Walker, no, three Johnny Walker. That's too greedy, man. That's too greedy. They'll come and watch. She essentially argued is what they can do, but they cannot enforce the law. Nicholas?
Yeah, and it's something we're once again very familiar with in South Africa. The police are only barely sort of holding on, especially in South Africa's rural areas, where in some places they're pretty much non-existent, and people make other plans when it comes to law and order. We can see that by the huge number of vigilante killings that happen in South Africa all the time. Hundreds of people are killed, if not more, every single year by people frustrated with the lack of police action on things. And it really seems to me like in South Africa there are really two groups of people. Those who are sort of willing to comply with the law and tend to be abused by the cops, and those who are not willing to comply with the law, and they are they don't take the cops' opinions particularly seriously, should I say. And this is, I think, one of the biggest problems we have. So we can talk about, bad government economic policy and corruption and all these other problems. But until the basic functions of the state, like law and order, are sorted out, and the police force is respected, trusted, and effective, we're really not going to get anywhere out of this. I mean, imagine you're a guy who's, thinking about investing in property. Maybe you're a foreigner who wanted to buy a shopping center or something like the one in Alex. It's been burned down. Why would you ever do that now?
Exactly.
There's just too much risk. And of course, who suffers from that? Poor people.
Exactly. Again, Dumo, lay it out for us in terms of the context here, because you have a government who will be insistent on passing these laws. In fact, if there's one thing there's no shortage of in this country, there's a shortage of water, there's a shortage of electricity, there's a shortage of money in people's pockets. I can go down the line insofar as the meaningful things that there is a shortage of. But the one thing there is a plentiful abounds of, aside from political rhetoric, is the laws that these politicians pass. Laws which, of course, are designed by nature to pick winners and losers in society. Laws by their very nature, which the losers inevitably always are the disenfranchised, the poor, the ones who don't have close proximity to politicians. Talk to me about how we're seeing that almost play itself out now, where those who make the laws, in economics we call it the moral hazard. Those who make decisions are never there to pay the cost of the outcomes, or the poor outcomes of that decision. Therefore, because they don't pay the cost, they just keep making the bad decisions. We're seeing that right now with the political elites who pass these laws safely ensconced behind bodyguards, as is the case with Begitele, safely ensconced behind high walls and gated communities, as most elites and the political elites are. Not that I'm railing against people having protecting themselves, but it's a little hypocritical when it's the political elites who are doing it.
Right. The thing about the political elite, as you mentioned earlier, is that they have the means to dodge the ill effects of the laws that they put in place. Because, of course, they got connections and many of them get paid much more than us. When I saw how much a parliamentarian earned and then Ramaphosa said they're struggling, I was like, what? Please give me that salary. I'd be happy. I mean, I'll be moving into a new house and everything like
But
that.
then Oliver Twist ball, can I have some more, please? Another million, please.
Another million. Like, I mean, like, and I'll be honest, I don't even earn half of that in a year, to be honest. But
Sure.
the reality is that this is the situation that we find ourselves in. Talking about laws, another incident, another thing that I put on Facebook was that I mentioned how if you want to build a new hospital, it has to be approved by the health minister. And now we have a shortage of hospital beds. And that has actually brought in an unseen cost, which is that, people cannot innovate in creating hospitals. Like now, where I live right now, it used to be an office space. Now it's a residential space. And I'm just saying that, well, now if more people are actually leaving the office space and working from home, that leaves a lot of commercial space open. Why aren't we seeing them converted into hospitals? And again, it's the regulations. And then who suffers? It's people that actually need the treatment from those hospitals, and they can't get it because why? The government runs like 90% of the healthcare system in South Africa. So this is just like one situation that I feel that many people are ignoring, is that it doesn't matter what Lord Ramaphosa puts in place. He will never pay the price. He will never lose his job. He's going to get his salary. He's going to go home. He's going to be in his convoy of cars and everything like that. And he will get everything that he wants. But for us, it's going to be even much more difficult because of the fact that there are laws that we cannot dodge because we don't have the financial means to actually dodge them. And this is the sad thing. And people need to wake up to this, because otherwise, I got a feeling that people are going to wake up to it too late. And when it's too late, it's just going to be the worst thing ever. But yeah, I totally agree with you there, Sihle. The ruling elite have way too much power, so much so that they can dodge the very laws that they implement.
Koketso, I'm going to come to you. I'm going to play devil's advocate. In fact, I'm going to play a leftist. And I want to see how you react to the usual arguments we hear. And Sindile, I'm going to do the same thing to you. So gird your loins. I'm coming in your direction just now. So the leftists would say, well, here's a panel of, these right-wingers who, of course, don't care about poor people. That's why they want to see an end to lockdown, whereas we would argue that, look at the cases, they keep going up. Even when we impose a lockdown, they just keep going up. So that means we need more lockdown. More lockdown will help us get back to normal real soon. And don't mind the politicians who are gathering. The virus doesn't really, those are just a few isolated cases of gatherings. And if you were to police those, sorry, I know this is a bit long, but I'm just piecing together all sorts of arguments you've heard this past week, including from Koketso. If we police those gatherings, there'll be anarchy. There'll be another Marikana. So which matters more? A few deaths from COVID or a Marikana situation because the police acted?
So I think maybe the first thing to note here is that maybe we touched on this a little bit last week, is that I think everyone would be a lot more open to police doing the kind of policing that we'd want them to do if they actually had a track record of good policing, firstly. So the first argument is they don't have such a record. We don't trust the police. They don't police when they are supposed to. They're very selective in, who they go after. Strikes are busy happening left, right, center, in contravention of the law. But remember the time when surfers were on a beach and you saw parked police vans chilling by a beach to make sure that no one can actually go and snorkel. So that's the first thing to actually realize, right? The second one now, when we're talking about probably the economical impact here, is that, look, we get that, safety is probably of a higher importance than how your bank balance is looking right now. But we had quite a bit of extensive conversation around this last year, that there is no healthcare without a functioning economy. The government gets its money from yours and mine's taxes. So if I lose my job, I'm not paying pay-as-you-earn tax. I'm not giving government money because I don't have money to give. And in response, the net effect of that is the government then receives less money, which in effect means they've got less money to actually spend on your health. So yeah, that's really the prime argument here. The two cannot exist one without the other. Of course, there are ways to mitigate it. The common one is you can go take out an IMF loan, or you can simply print more money. But again, our tax base isn't big enough to say, guys, let's rough it out for a little bit while we all go back to normal health. We're not in that situation. So you can't actually advocate for something without actually thinking about its realistical implications. And the realistical implication in this instance is that A, we don't have police that actually does what they're supposed to do, so you can write them off. And B, we're not sitting with the kind of economy that's been burgeoning at double-digit growth for the past decade for us to be able to say, guys, let's rewind maybe back to 2015's levels of economic development and growth so we can all get healthy. Because if you go back to 2015, the situation was terrible even back then.
Absolutely. And Sindile, I did say I'm going to come to you and play devil's advocate, or just the sort of asinine rhetoric we've heard from broadly the left, but even, it's not exclusively the left. Please don't get me wrong, dear viewer. I've heard some really asinine stuff too come from supposedly people who argue they support my ideological underpinnings. But Cindy, I'm going to pose this one to you because I heard it from Ukbeki in particular this week, and the Minister of Defense, Nosiviwe Mapisa Ngakula. And this is the argument. I want you to dispel or agree with it. Well, we recognize that there is complete anarchy on the streets across the country, and it's growing. In fact, if you watch on social media, Johannesburg CBD today was a complete cluster F. Trying to avoid swearing there. As I said, as that Big Daddy Liberty said on his show, in El Dorado Park, it's flames, rocks being thrown all over the show. Soweto is a no-go zone. Durban CBD, I just saw a video now on Smith Street where there are random hijackings of vehicles by mobs of individuals. This is nothing short of a complete breakdown of the rule of law. Leave aside the COVID regulations, just the complete breakdown of the rule of law. We recognize that, she'll say. However, we will not deploy the South African Defence Force. Now, whether you agree with that or not, as a principle, I'm not prosecuting that issue here. I want your view on the hypocrisy. Will not deploy the South African National Defence Force, even though we deployed it, for example, for the gangs in Cape Town when we were asked to do so to restore law and order, because we argued back then that the presence of the SANDF will be there to assist the police in just stabilizing a community, but we won't do it now because, this is just politics, and let it play itself out. Sindile, talk to me about the hypocrisy of that particular point, whether you agree with the army being in the streets or not, which I don't agree with personally, but that's neither here nor there. But the hypocrisy of suddenly downplaying this violence, but in the same breath, making the exact opposite argument when it came to Cape Flats gangsters.
I think this goes back to a broader point about South Africa for me. And that is that we are a reactive rather than proactive society. So I just want to tack on a bit to the point that even Koketso made. South Africa would be in a much better place if the government had just done its job properly. We wouldn't need lockdowns. If you remember back from the 21 days, we were told that government had to increase healthcare capacity. The government even opened field hospitals, which they've now closed. Charlotte Maxeke, parts of Charlotte Maxeke, one of the biggest hospitals in the country, was closed. There was a 460 million rand hospital, which was handed over in Gauteng, in Carletonville, which is not operational. It was handed over to the government in May. So my thing is this: lockdowns are simply a reaction to the government not actually doing anything properly. And then the violence that we see on the streets is a reaction to that. And so it keeps escalating to the point where some people would say, hey, let's have the SANDF come in. So it just keeps escalating. And then the SANDF, we might have more problems because this is Africa. And one of my problems is this, and I don't want to prosecute it too much. One of my problems with bringing in the army to everything is that the army might start seeing themselves as our saviors. And if you know anything about African history, when the army starts seeing themselves as our saviors, that's when it starts sliding down even more. So there is that fundamental problem in this country of saying, of not being prepared, of not being proactive, of not actually just doing your job properly. Nicholas touched on it as well with the police, but it's actually system-wide problem in this entire country. And I mean, leftists could argue and tell us, okay, we're right-wing people, we don't care about the poor. Actually, I would argue not. Part of why I argue the way I do is because I do care a lot about what happens with, to people without money. And an economy like ours shrinking, if you look at all the data sets, if we starve people more in this country, like it's not a separate thing of it's jobs versus the economy. If the economy goes down the toilet, more people will end up dying. And this is especially children. Poor children will end up dying. People forget during this lockdown that a lot of children were eating flowers in the Eastern Cape to survive hunger. There's a lot of children who are systematically starving because the ANC decided to close the school's nutrition program. You understand? There's a lot of pregnant mothers who are increasingly food insecure in this country. And I don't think you need to be a pediatrician to understand that starving children in utero is going to have some horrible downstream costs for this country. And by the way, I would argue this to leftists, because leftists always then kind of circle back and go, oh, it's white privilege, it's this. I would argue all of the racialized inequality in this country, maybe not all of it, but a lot of it has to do with what happens in utero to children, to poor black children and poor colored children, is that they get starved and their emotional and mental and intellectual bandwidth shrinks or is not expanded because they starve in utero, and then when they get out and their mothers give birth to them and their mothers go hungry. Because the first 3 years of a child's life are a determinant of that. So the thing is this, yes, are very, very critical to early childhood development. So my argument is simply this. Lockdowns, we haven't considered the full dimensions of just how devastating lockdowns are, just from a data perspective on how mothers are starving, children are starving, toddlers are starving, school children are starving. We haven't considered the ramifications for our economy. We haven't considered the ramifications for social grants, because social grants are going to start thinning out even as inflation increases. We haven't considered so much to do with how jobs are going to, what's going to happen with our jobs, the investors. People are going to go hungry even more in this country. People are going to die even more as our healthcare goes to the toilet. So that's, for me, is the argument against leftists. Leftists often use this emotionalized thing of we're saving lives, but what it boils down to is simply this. An economy is people. And when you crush an economy, you crush people. People have got to stop talking about an economy like it's an impersonal thing. We are the people that make up the economy. And if you crush it and you allow it to blow into smithereens, that's what's going to happen to people. And the first people that are going to suffer are the people at the bottom. It's as easy and as simple as that. And we, as people, even if they sit here and go, oh, you right-wingers, we have got to make that clear to people. Personally, I am not willing to concede anything to leftists on this point. People who play with the economy do not understand that they're playing with people's lives. And I will not concede a damn point to anyone who says we don't care about the poor when we argue for the economy, because the poor people are the ones who suffer first when an economy goes to the toilet. We shouldn't concede that point at all.
Absolutely, absolutely. Guys, we're in the last 15 minutes of the show. There we go. We're in the last 15 minutes of the show. I'm going to come to you, Dumo, and then Nick, because I must change tack a little bit, albeit we're still we're still revolving around this issue broadly of lockdown, the hypocrisy around it, how the political elites have been able to amass and break lockdown rules. Meanwhile, the ordinary chap gets thrown in prison, gets the fines and the like. So we're going to still keep with that. But I want to introduce another topic, because I spoke on it this Wednesday on the Big Daddy Liberty show. In fact, it was the first ever episode where we brought in the viewers quite physically on screen and had allowed them to have their say. It's a topic that I think really has been shirked to the side by, the big trio, the mainstream media, the politicians, and really the political elites who are all gung-ho on lockdown. And that's the depression, the externalities, the negative externalities of a lockdown policy, which is the depression and the sense of anxiety, the effects it has on people's mental health. And of course, there's no quantifiable data right now, but there is anecdotal data that I pieced together from the South African Depression and Anxiety Group. Shout out to SADC in that regard, which already pointed out that as things were, 23 South Africans per day were committing suicide because of a myriad of those sort of mental health issues, from the depression to the anxiety to the you name it, which then begs the question, are these not the people right now who are the silent victims, the ones who are going unnoticed? And really, to be honest, politicians will be very happy for you to not notice them. I'm going to come to you, Nicholas, then Dumo. But before I do that, guys, thank you so much for watching. You're watching Liberty and Friends. This is your week-ending news analysis show. I'm in conversation with the Sindile Vabaza, who is a political analyst, a social commentator on most issues. In the country, Dumo Denga, the host of the Manpatria podcast, Koketso Resane, who's also part of the Manpatria team, and of course, Nicholas Lorimer, who is with the Daily Friend. If you have just joined us, hit that like button. Hit it right now. Hit it right now as I'm buying time and saying this to you, because it helps get this show out and about. We're talking about the very issues that are topical right now. You've just probably come from listening to the president of this country. We haven't seen the nitty-gritties. I'm assuming we stayed on level 4 and not much change. We'll scan the comment section in that regard, but hit the like button right now. There are about 523 of us, 24, who are watching. You're watching Liberty and Friends. Nicholas, I sound like Porky Pig. The depression and essentially the mental health issues that we're not talking about at the moment. It seemed instructive to me that when these riots, for example, started taking off, one of the first places people went to in order to when they were looting effectively was some of the booze shops, your Tops and your Pick and Pay liquors, etc. People often dismiss that as, oh, there we go again, South Africans and their dependence on alcohol. But surely there's something even broader to this, a depressed nation desperate for some sort of substance to numb the pain of a lockdown.
Yeah, so I'll say that, well, first off, the plural of anecdote is not data, anecdotes is not data. And yet I will give you and say that I have anecdotes, lots of people around me, I think 5 people who I'm friends with have basically gone through some sort of mental issues during this lockdown. So I think it's a very real problem. And I think there's been evidence coming out of the US that corroborates that in places where people really lock down. And I agree that lockdowns have been pretty bad for people's mental health. And I buy completely the theory, I think it was suggested a little bit earlier, that when riots, things like this that we saw all over the world, it wasn't just in America, we saw them in Holland, in the Netherlands, in the UK, everywhere, that the lockdown and its effects on people's psyche and just sort of feeling of sociability has really, it's had a real effect, and it's caused people to act out in very strange ways. And this is a cost we will be counting for a long time. And I think, there's a lot of people who argue about, we don't have any clear answers, I think, on how to deal with COVID, but it is worth mentioning again the fact that my colleague Gabriel Krauser made a lot at the beginning of the lockdown period, which is that the evidence that lockdowns actually helped stop the spread are not really that strong. They're really, we're not going to know for sure for a long time, but there's a lot of evidence to suggest that individuals looking out for themselves, looking after their own health, had far more of an effect than government decrees, which usually followed after the fact of what people themselves had already done. So I think that even from the sort of live saves perspective of, from COVID, we're going to probably see much less of an effect than many people assume now. And so when we put up this dichotomy of livelihoods versus lives, I really don't think that's the case, because I think far more often lockdowns have cost both lives and livelihoods and saved very little of both.
Absolutely. And Dumo, that's the crux, isn't it? It's this idea that we're just persisting almost. It's all political theater at this point, really. There's no real efficacy being proven. In fact, no, I want you to make a bigger point at Dumo. We've gotten to a point, and we'll end on this particular section. We've gotten to a point where there is no diversity of thought at all in the mainstream media. The mainstream media itself doesn't even question the dogma that we hear from the likes of Cyril Ramaphosa. If Cyril comes on stage now, as he probably did tonight, and says, well, we're continuing with level 4, we're continuing to ban the alcohol, no gatherings, the blah, 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 blah. No one even questions the efficacy of this policy approach anymore. It's accepted. For instance, we've even gotten to a point where no one questions the quality of the data itself. At the beginning of this whole thing, they still, at least Baga, they still respected us and said COVID-related deaths. Now it's just COVID deaths. And because it's COVID deaths, it justifies in their mind the continuation of this policy approach, which has shown that it doesn't stop those very COVID deaths that they talk about. It doesn't stop, effectively, the rising case numbers that they seem to argue is the major problem here. So what's going on here, Dumo? Why do we have a situation where there's a lethargic approach, including by us, by the way, the citizenry, to questioning the political dogma?
I think what is happening now, we're starting to see a situation where the mainstream media is creating a narrative, and a lot of people are starting to accept that narrative, and whoever tries to question it, they kind of get ridiculed. It's almost like, you're part of this cult, and then when you see that the cult leader's gone crazy, and you tell a fellow cult member, like, hey, don't you think the leader's gone crazy? And then, once you question that, then the other people here, and they say, oh, he's crazy, he doesn't know what he's talking about, what. So it becomes like that, and that's the situation that I think we are experiencing right now, is that we have a Cyril cult, and the media are this like megaphone for Cyril. And what happens is that when someone questions, they're like, look at this person. I mean, like, they don't even question Cyril, because Cyril can't be wrong. And what happens now is that a lot of people, when they receive this, they want someone to speak out against it, but they're too scared to speak out, so they keep quiet. So I think we have a situation where people want to say it, but they don't want to be the black sheep. And I'm not trying to be racial about it. You know what I mean by black sheep. And also
the fact that you have to even qualify that.
The lefties here, they're gonna be putting some comments. What, black sheep? But he's black. So it's self-hatred, right? Oh my word. Like, oh. Then it just veers off. But anyway, the problem is just that the media is simping for Cyril, and as a result of them simping for Cyril, people kind of take, well, Cyril must be right. And on the other hand, we also have a situation where South Africans want to speak out, but they don't want to speak out because they don't want to get ridiculed. And I say we can follow the American model. Look at Trump, look at Biden. These guys face tough questions, from the media, and I mean, let those guys, let Cyril face it. There was this one guy that was speaking about, it was during that Moseneke inquiry, and he made a speech about like why we should vote and everything like that. And, and he challenged the president, and we need to see more of that. So I think in a nutshell, just to sum up my points, I just feel that, the media need to be a bit more brave in questioning the president. They did it all the time when Zuma was in power. So why don't you do it when Ramaphosa's in power? Just because he looks like a good guy? No, come on. Keep doing what you did. Do what you did to, do what you do to Zuma, do what you do to Cyril, what you did to Zuma. Yeah, that's what I want to say.
Exactly. Guys, we must wrap up. I did sort of agree to shutting it down a little quicker today, because I know some of you are soccer buffs, but if you can just indulge me with 10 minutes, please, an extra 10 minutes, I'll appreciate it. Because there's a conversation now to be had. Let me just make sure that I've gone through all my notes here. There's a conversation to be had about the what now. So level 4 continues, and we'll obviously continue to see fellow South Africans going through the depression, going through the hunger, the starvation, a collective darkness that has crept on this country. And I know all of us can feel it. All of us can feel it. But what do we do now? And I've argued that the South African cannot continue to be compliant. He cannot continue to be the sort of person who's like, well, let me not ruffle feathers, because Cyril knows what he's doing. Whether they say that out of naivety or they say it out of because they genuinely believe it. But you now need a situation where there's 3 things that need to happen. And I want to get your views on this, guys. If we, and I say we broadly, as those South Africans who are frustrated by this and believe that there are alternatives to responding to COVID-19, because no one here is a denier of COVID-19. It exists. Some people are dying from it. It has effects on the health of people. Of course it does. But the response to COVID-19 seems to be the actual problem in this country. It is the one that's creating all of these negative externalities and creating even the frustration we're seeing boil over in the streets. I'll put it to you guys that 3 things need to happen. Number 1, business needs to grow a backbone in this country. It's simply not enough for them to cozy up to the politicians and expect to be eaten last by the crocodile. That's simply not happening. Even corporates need to wake up, because corporates have not been acting in the interest of the people who matter most to them, which is the customer. And to do that, 3 things, as I said. Number 1, there needs to be a unity of purpose. And that unity of purpose doesn't mean, every South African kumbaya will fight Cyril, blah, blah, blah. No, that's not what I'm talking about. But even at a sector level, an entrepreneur, a business owner, rallying fellow business owners and saying, guys, we need to do something. We need to be vocal. We need to take this on in more than just a rah-rah-rah with a placard on the street and being shot at with water cannons, because SAPS is really tough with the elderly, the grannies and the business owners. But you need the unity, the people to unite. The second one is, once people are united under a particular cause, only then can you really organize them. Organize a real sort of pushback by the citizens. It might be even threatening a tax revolt by various organizations. It could be even business saying, fudge it, we're not afraid of you dangling the licensing over us as the threat. We'll just open and do so with the necessary precautions. That could be some of the things that people may say. Again, I'm not inciting anything, just in case someone out there goes, oh, Big Daddy Liberty says inciting, blah, 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 blah. But these are things that people could do in terms of them pushing back against a political elite who clearly don't care about them and their livelihoods. And of course, once you have that unity, once you have that level of organization, only then can you mobilize people, mobilize them to then do things to push back, to be heard by the politicians, to then influence policy. So it's unity, unity of purpose in particular, organizing people and then mobilizing them to act. Your thoughts on this? I'm going to begin with you, Koketso, because again, South Africans have just been way too quiet, and there's far too many Twitter warriors and social media warriors, when actually the real battle is on a policy level and voicing it directly to politicians.
So I think you're spot on. I think we need to manage our expectations a little bit here. I don't think big corporates in particular are going to be first out of the gate. You saw how long it took for a corporate like SAB to actually come out and say, listen, this ban is actually starting to hurt us now. So yeah, we need to manage our expectations as individual citizens and not rely on big, heavy-hitting big brands to actually come out and advance our interests. Best way for us to actually do this is, the easiest one to think up of. Remember, guys, we're about maybe a few weeks away from elections here. So it's time to actually hurt this government at the elections. You saw what happened to the Democratic Alliance in the last at the national government elections, right? And then they had to go back and self-reflect, etc., etc. So we need to actually now, as a citizen, we start hurting this ruling party at the ballot box and not assume that they hear your cry. They don't hear your cry. The only way they'll hear your cry is if you reduce their number of seats in parliament. Maybe then they'll wake up. It's good to see that there's mushrooming new parties coming up. Specifically, I'm talking about the NSA. I'm winking at the ZACP as well here to to come out from the shadows again. But yeah, we need to hurt them where it hurts them, where it hurts, and that's the parliamentary seats. Do that when you vote, and also organize yourselves as communities to actually look out for each other, because we're on our own. No one is coming. The help you need is most likely going to reside within one of your neighbors than it is going to reside from a media that you expect to question the president harshly, and B, policies which have shown themselves time and time again that they are about keeping the status quo and not about putting you first and foremost. And if you're a family man as well, you have this responsibility to you and yours.
Absolutely. I'm going to come to you, Nicholas. But before I do that, guys, please, the engagement is not where it should be. If you're watching this and you're enjoying the content, hit that like button. There's 629 of us, probably more. Just as I said, that the number went up to nearly just 500 people, 15 shy of 500 people. Guys, hit that like button. It helps spread this to more people once we end the stream. Hit that like button, help feed kids in Africa, as I like to joke on the show. Nick, let me come to you, because again, it's that notion of, it's not Big Daddy saying this. It's not Big Daddy saying this. Ordinary South Africans are beginning to ask the question, what do we do? How do we fight back? Clearly, if the politicians are brave enough to physically meet and disregard, level 4 regulations, maybe we as ordinary South Africans can find a way within, reason, and not putting people's lives at risk, to actually say, no, we don't consent to having our lives and livelihoods destroyed by politicians who've never missed a single salary since the beginning of this damn lockdown. It can't be one set of rules for the elites and another for us, and we pay the cost as ordinary people.
Definitely. And I think it's worth remembering that the largest block of voters in South Africa is people who were eligible to vote but did not vote. So there's an enormous number of people out there who are not engaged. But beyond just voting, there's all sorts of other things. There's activism of various kinds. There's protesting. There's writing letters. There's talking with your neighbors. There's joining civil society organizations, all that kind of thing. And I was on a podcast with some of my colleagues recently, and we were talking about one of the ways that many of the terrible policies have survived for so long in South Africa. Everything from apartheid to bad ANC policy. It's because so many people just sat on the sidelines and didn't want to talk about it because it was too difficult, or it was too frustrating, or too tiring or boring or whatever. And as a result, that small group of people who wanted to hold the country in some sort of ideological madness were able to keep doing it. And when South Africans change that, when we all get politically active, get politically engaged, and put in responsible politicians and hold people to account and become active, then we'll see real change in South Africa.
Agreed. Sorry, I'm just going through the comments there, and there's a particular comment, Sindile, that I want you to factor in. I've just lost it now. Very good point was made. Yes, there it is now on the screen by Unobi. Here's a scary thought. He says, Cyril might be the longest serving president in our history, which will be forever, given that elections, they're already touting this, aren't they, Cindy, of postponing elections. And the loudest voices in that particular brigade has been the EFF and the ANC.
Okay, I'm not a particular expert on this, so I'll rely on the words of people who I think are constitutional experts. A good friend, Martin van Staden, he put up a post on. Shout out to Martin, love him and his hair. No, I'm sorry. Martin, disregard that if you watch this. I think what Martin pointed out was that the Constitution strictly lays out a time frame for when not when elections can be held, but how long people can be in office. And the end date is October. So fundamentally, for the government to delay elections, they actually have to, for lack of a better phrase, go against the Constitution and what's laid out in our Constitution. So I think for that, they're going to have to do something really drastic to delay these elections. And I think our opposition parties and civil society can fight against that. I think they have recourse to fight against that if the politicians try to do that. So I think for me, I'm relying on what I've seen some of the people who know better than I do on this matter, that there is recourse for us if the politicians do try to sort of run away from this. On the point, though, I want to add on to what Koketso was saying. I think for me, what I think would be the best outcome in this country for us to get the help we need as ordinary citizens is if political parties, the power starts to get diluted. So what I mean by that, one of the best things I think that could happen is if the RET faction of the ANC broke off because of what's happening, because I think Cyril's got the upper hand, what's happening, they start something of their own and they dilute the power of the ANC. And then you have a sort of system in a competitive democracy where you have the RET people, the EFF, the ANC, the DA, some other parties. And in an ideal situation, what you'd have is that people would have to try and find multiple coalitions just to get 50%. For me, that is the ideal situation, because then it opens up a lot of things that could happen. Because for me, the fundamental problem in South Africa is that power is too centralized and the levers of power are too centralized. We can talk about policy and what parties can do and what opposition parties can do, but the fact remains for me, as long as power is centralized, we can't fight against this government. Because what's shown is that when power is devolved to the most local level closest to people, people become more engaged and empowered. So for me, that would be the ideal situation. Somehow, we've got to find a way to get power more local, because then we can start to open up those realities. Because for me, and I think, and I want to make this comment, I don't want to prosecute it too much. We're not going to get a situation in South Africa where parts of it can secede, because I've seen what's happened to places like Somaliland and how everybody shuns places that try to secede. But we can get pretty much the same thing as secession if we devolve the power in this country, because then parties will absolutely have to compete to our interests. Because I think for now in South Africa, and it goes back to a fundamental issue, for example, people who live in Joburg and Cape Town, they don't have the same interests as someone who lives in Douglas in the Northern Cape, or some small town, rural town in the Eastern Cape. And that's the problem for me. I think we're trying to put too many people in a basket and assume we have all the same values, we have the same priorities and the same needs, and we don't. We absolutely just have to find a way to devolve the power of the politicians, because that's how the ANC wins. The ANC can always overrule us because the system is designed to concentrate power for them where they can overrule us. Because I think I've seen this. Citizens are revolting in local municipalities. In Mthatha, where my mother lives, people are revolting against the municipality. There's places where citizens have won cases against the municipality to provide their own services, and then the government has to pay them to run it. So that's what I'm trying to say, is that people in local spaces already are saying, look, we're tired of this. We don't want any more of this. And it's the same thing with lockdown. A lot of people, if you talk to people on the street, if you go into Elokshini, Kasi, and you talk to people, they don't like lockdowns. A lot of people don't, but we just simply get overridden by Cyril. We got overridden by Karens who are sitting at home, who will not lose lockdown, who will not lose income during the lockdown. And so that's the thing. Whatever we do, we can always be overruled by the political elite if we don't find a way to dilute their power. That should be our number one aim in this country, is to dilute their power.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's pretty much
of course,
it. It
we on
sounds
this
like
show
I'm going to church right now.
And absolutely, rightly so, and very enjoyed. Insofar as here on this show, we're big proponents, of course, here of for highly federalized South African arrangements. If
Three
not,
cheers for
very
federalism.
as I'm saying, in certain regions, even just seceding, if that's what they want to do. Guys, we are running out. We've run out of time, effectively. Let me just do a final word from everybody. And in that particular sense, what you'll be looking at in the coming week and what you want people to pay attention to. Maybe you are a writer and there's something you're going to be releasing this week. Share that too. And of course, how we can reach you. Before any of that, there are 702 of us on here. A bit of a record in that regard. But guys, please hit that like button. Pardon me. Hit that like button. It really does assist us in getting the show out. Do it right now. Hit that like button, especially if you enjoyed the commentary from everybody here. Guys, final word. Nick, I'll begin with you.
Yeah, keep your eye on the big attacks on our civil liberties that are going on. Gun rights, property rights, all these things are under attack at the moment. Government is using the chaos and stress of the current situation to try and push through a bunch of stuff. And so get educated about those issues and educate other people, because the more people who know about these things, the more people we can get together to fight them. You can find me on The Daily Friend Show, which you can search for on YouTube or on any podcast app. I'm also on a podcast with Gabriel Krauser called Two Crickets and a Thorn Tree. We recently did a very, very long episode. So only for those who have a lot of time to kill on a hypothetical world where Jacob Zuma might have been a good president, and we debate whether such a thing was ever possible. So yeah, check us out there.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. That is, of course, Nicholas Lorimer from The Daily Friend. Koketso Resane. Brother, what are you going to be looking at in the upcoming week? And hey, man, what are you going to be bringing onto the Manpatria show?
Okay, well, let's start with the Manpatria show. Again, that's where you find me. If you want to hear more of my thoughts, coming out tomorrow, I believe. Yeah, so just check that out as well. In terms of what am I currently busy with, I'm actually reading quite a lot. So I've been churning through books for the past week or so. Currently reading Speechless by Michael Knowles. Solid book. But yeah, maybe my closing remark, I think I've said this even on this platform before, that guys, remember, it is an election year. So yeah, you're going to see a lot more of what looks like, the ANC cleaning house. But as soon as those elections are done, it's going to be back to normal, most likely. So keep that in mind and don't have too many high hopes, basically. Let's wait for October and see what happens after that.
Absolutely. That, of course, is Koketso Resane, 1/3 of the Manpatria trio. In fact, speaking about the Manpatria trio, Dumo, what can you expect from the show?
Right. As Koketso mentioned, the Manpatria podcast, episode 95, is coming out tomorrow. It's 7 o'clock. Please watch that. We're 5 episodes from 100. Wow. So can't wait to get to the 100 episode. So that'll be awesome. And also, we have a new show called The Austrian Perspective. This is just a show where I just give the news from the Austrian School of Economics. So please look out for that, guys. And yeah, thanks for having me on, Sindile.
Thank you, brother, for coming on. Much appreciated. And last but not least, someone who I can see just from the comment section has lit things up. Sindile Vabaza, what will you be looking at this coming week? And how do the people reach you?
You can find many of my very annoying rants on Facebook. I just rant and I meme, man. I rant in my meme and then look past all the football stuff where I insult all the people who don't support my team. You can also find me. I have a column on The Daily Friend. Go to pump those people, the good people over at The Daily Friend, every first Saturday. You can find some of my thoughts. You can find some of my thoughts at the Free Market Foundation. For me, the big thing I've been thinking about is healthcare, especially because of this crisis. I think we need to push. One of the things I propose, by the way, just shortly, is that I think we need to find a way where we can get more people away from the public healthcare system. We need to find a way where people, my proposition is just tax credits towards people and incentivize people to get better healthcare. But anyway, I won't give away too much. That's kind of the thing I'm thinking about. And secondly, go out there in the local elections. Please vote for the people who you think are competent, because I think that's something we're not talking about in the midst of all of this, is that local elections, whatever your issues are with opposition parties, please just vote for the people who you feel are most competent and who can run a municipality.
Absolutely.
I've spent too long having power cuts and having municipalities that don't deliver services, but you have to pay rates, etc., etc., etc. Just look at what people are saying and what they will do, and vote for the right people then, and then we can take it from there.
Absolutely.
Thank you for having me, by the way.
Thank you for joining us on the show. You will definitely be back on here. That, of course, is Sindile Vabaza, political and social analyst, someone who you should check out on his social media. And, of course, as he said, is a columnist on the Daily Friend and writes for the Free Market Foundation. Guys, thank you so much to everybody, and thank you, dear viewer, for watching the show. I super appreciate it. Please hit that like button as you leave. I'll see you on Wednesday for the Big Daddy Liberty Show, and next week Sunday, of course, for Liberty and Friends. I hope you're enjoying the show, and it's becoming your go-to on a Sunday evening at 8 p.m. to round up the news week that was. Thank you very much for watching, and remember, as I always say at the end of every show, never trust a commie.